peripheral nervous system. In the previous lecture, we talked about the central nervous system, in which we discussed the different parts, the forebrain, midbrain, hindbrain, and then was included in the forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain. And
मैम आपकी आवाज नहीं आ रही
okay, just minute.
नो
आ रही है?
उधर से ओके लेकिन इधर से मैम की आवाज नहीं आ रही है
बोलो।
आई थी भी आई थी
Can you hear me now? Achha, so as I was saying that we were talking about the classification of the nervous system, and in that we said that it is the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. In the last lecture, we discussed about the central nervous system, the different components, the forebrain, midbrain, hindbrain, what all was included in this, what briefly we talked about the structure of these components, that is cerebrum, pons, midbrain, hindbrain, medulla, cerebellum, all that. Then we talked about the cavities, the central cerebral aqueduct, lateral ventricle, third ventricle, fourth ventricle, and all the cavities which were there. Now we are going to continue with the second component of the nervous system, that is the peripheral nervous system. Peripheral nervous system basically includes nerve fibers and cell bodies, which is there outside the central nervous system, that is in the cranial cavity or outside that conduct impulses to or away from the central nervous system. That is what we say. Central was something which was there in the cranial cavity. This is something which is outside the cranial cavity, and it includes the nerve fibers and their cell bodies, which lies outside the central nervous system, and it forms a communication between the system outside and the system inside. That is what we call as peripheral nervous system. अच्छा ये शिफ्ट नहीं हो रहा आगे ये आगे नहीं जा रही नहीं ये यहाँ से अगली स्लाइड ठीक है. So now the first thing we said is the nerve fiber, which is a component of the peripheral nervous system. What exactly is nerve fiber? The main thing which informs the nerve fiber is the axon, because that is concerned with bringing in and taking out information, and also the dendrites. But basically, the nerve which is formed, that is formed by the axon. This axon is covered by the neurolemma, as we had the cytoplasm sarcolemma and all the coverings of the cell membrane of the all the organs. This has something which we call as the neurolemma, and outside that is the surrounding endoneurial connective tissue. That is, nerve fiber is the smallest component of a nerve that is there, that is covered by the endoneurium. This neurolemma consists of the cell membranes of the Schwann cells. This is component, and that immediately surrounds the axon, separating it from the other axons. That is one. In the peripheral nervous system, the neurolemma forms two classes of nerve fibers, one which is myelinated and the other nerve fiber which is non-myelinated. In the myelinated nerve fiber, the Schwann cell encloses an individual axon, and this forms the myelinated nerve fiber. And there is another one which is the unmyelinated nerve fiber, in which the Schwann cell encloses more than one axon, that is multiple axons, which do not produce the myelination. So this is what we form as the unmyelinated nerve fibers. If you see this picture, the first one, in this, the left side, you see one axon, that is the yellowish component, that is enclosed by this encircled blue structure, which is your myelin sheath, and that is by the Schwann cells. Then the picture next to it is again yellowish, is your nerve fibers. That is the axons which are yellow, and they are enclosed, many nerve fibers, they are being enclosed by one Schwann cell. So you can see that they are enclosed in one. This is the structure of an unmyelinated. The other one is the myelinated axon. So that is the myelinated and the unmyelinated nerve. This basically also shows you the other picture, the myelinated nerve fibers. That is the smallest nerve fibrils. One is enclosed by the sheath from the Schwann cells, and in that you have the axon. This is basically the myelinated nerve fiber. Then the nerve, what exactly does the nerve as a whole consist of? When we talk about the peripheral nerve, what do you understand or what all do you include in the nerve? This is a bundle of nerve fibers. Nerve fibers is the smallest structure. Smallest structure includes that is the axon and maybe a few dendrites, but basically a nerve is composed of your axon. So a bundle of nerve fibers outside the central nervous system, or you can have them as groups in case of a larger nerve. Then it is covered on the outside by the neurolemma. It is covered by the connective tissue covering. This binds the nerve fibers and the fascicles together. And what exactly do we mean by the connective tissue covering is endoneurium, perineurium, and epineurium. This is going to be enclosing it in layer wise. And then it has the blood vessels, that is vasa vasorum, the vasa nervosum in this case, that nourish the nerve fibers and their coverings. So nerves are fairly strong and resilient because the nerve fibers, they have a support outside by the three connective tissue coverings. Now, what exactly is the structure of a peripheral nerve? The first smallest unit is the nerve fiber, that is your axon. That is enclosed by, it has neurolemma on its outside, and this neurolemma sheaths the axon, and then outside these nerve fibers you have something what we call as the endoneurium. They are a group of nerve fibers. Then there are many bundles, what we also call them as fascicles. Many fascicles or bundles of these nerve fibers together, they are enclosed by your perineurium. So the small rounded structures inside it, they are your enclosed by the perineurium. Many bundles together, they are enclosed by the connective tissue, what we call as the epineurium. So outside the epineurium, this whole is what we say as the peripheral nerve. So when you see a structure of the peripheral nerve, what all you are going to see is something, a bigger round structure with smaller enclosed small bodies inside, which would be your fascicles, and then inside those you are going to have the nerve fibrils. So outermost is epineurium, then the bundles you have the perineurium, and perineurium you have the individual fascicles, small fascicle, groups of fascicles, they would be as endoneurium covering. So you do not have individual nerve fibers, but they are groups. So these are the three layers in which the peripheral nerve is formed and the connective tissue coverings are formed. That is why the nerve is a strong component. If you see this histological slide, you can see that this is a whole structure of the peripheral nerve. In this hole on the outside, there is your perineurium, that is the which is encircling each fiber, the bundles of fibers. Then each small fibril is going to be enclosed by the endoneurium, and then the outermost connective tissue which encircles the whole nerve, that is your epineurium, which is labeled as your EP. So when you see a section, you are going to see this cut sections with smaller levels. When you do it in histology, you will understand how do you see a peripheral nerve. So you have these three coverings that makes the nerve fiber or the nerve a strong structure. Then what you have in the peripheral nervous system, what exactly include is the nerves. There are two types of nerves that you include in the peripheral nervous system. One is from this, because we said up till the spinal cord, we have the central nervous system, that is, and the nerves coming out from that, they are called your spinal nerves. So if you see in this picture, that is where they are labeled as in the upper portion, this is your the spinal nerves. Okay, then you have the other thing which we include in this peripheral nervous system are your cranial nerves, that is arising from the brain. These are the two components which we include, and of course along with the third thing that we have in the peripheral nervous system is the ganglia, that is the spinal ganglia, and of course these ganglia are also including your ganglia of the autonomic nervous system, that is there. So these, you see this, the spinal ganglia, then you have the cranial nerves, and then you have the spinal nerves. These are the components of your peripheral nervous system. What are the types of nerves that you can see? You have two types of fibers which are included. One is the afferent or your sensory fibers, which convey impulses from the periphery to the central nervous system, maybe from the skin, maybe from the deeper structures. And efferent or your motor fibers, they convey impulses from the central nervous system to the effector organs, that is your muscles, glands, etc. So that is afferent, or you can call it sensory. I hope A is towards the central nervous system, E is away from it, from the organ. Okay, so these two are included in the nerve. The peripheral nervous system, if you say anatomically and operationally, is continuous with the central nervous system because all impulses, the ultimate control of these nerves, they take impulses to the higher centers. That is what we include in the brain. That is your central nervous system. It is there, and that gives the command, interprets all the information that comes, and then it gives the commands which is going to effect through your nerves. The peripheral nerve system lies, as I said, outside your cranial cavity and the vertebral canal. The vertebral canal has your spinal cord, cranial cavity has your brain. With these two are your central nervous system. Now, the nerves that we include are either cranial nerves or spinal nerves, that is peripheral nervous system. Cranial nerves, they exit through the cranial cavity, through the foramina, which we have studied in the gross. Only there are 12 pairs of cranial nerves, but 11 arise from the brain, and the 12th one, that is the 11th one that arises from the parts of the spinal cord, that is your accessory nerve. It has a cranial portion and it has a spinal part. The spinal part then arises from the spinal cord, then it ascends through the foramen magnum up into the brain where it unites with the cranial portion. Then the two, they collectively form the nerve and which is going to exit out. Okay, so that is the cranial nerves. They arise from the cranial cavity. Cranial nerves, what type of fibers do they contain? Some you will study, they are known as sensory nerves, purely sensory, and some they are purely motor nerves. But that is not exactly so. Mostly they are a mixture of both types of fibers. And it's only when we say it is a sensory nerve or a motor nerve, it's what we mean is what is the predominant amount of fibers that are present in it, whether they are sensory or it has a majority of the sensory action. That is why we call it the sensory nerve. Communication occurs between cranial nerves and between cranial nerves and upper spinal nerves. Thus, a nerve initially having some motor fibers, as it goes on its way, some fibers of the spinal nerve or some motor fibers can be added up, so making it a mixed nerve. So mixed nerve would be both fibers are there, but in case of pure motor and sensory, what we mean is one type of fibers are predominant, but the others are also there, and the main action is either sensory or motor. So you never say that the cranial nerves, they are purely motor or sensory. They just, when you say that, what you mean is that they are containing a majority of either motor or sensory fibers. And when it is a mixed nerve, the mixed nerve is going to be having both types of fibers in the same ratio, and it's going to perform the same type of mixed type of functions, motor as well as sensory, both at the same time. These are the 12 pairs of cranial nerves. They are paired, arising one on each side, concerned with different functions. One is olfactory, concerned with smell. Two is the optic nerve, sense of vision. Three, oculomotor, mostly it has supply with the eye muscles, the small intrinsic muscles of the eye. Trochlear is also concerned with the intrinsic muscles of the eye, which move your eyeball. Trigeminal nerve is a predominant nerve, which is concerned with your sensory supply of the face, and it also supplies to your muscles of mastication. It's mandibular division. So it is also called the muscles, the chewing nerve of the muscles of the chewing. Then the abducent is also supplying to the eye, that is your eye muscles, the abducent nerve, the sixth cranial nerve, it moves your eye laterally. Then you have the facial nerve, it is both motor and sensory, and it gives your motor supply as well as sympathetic and parasympathetic supply to the face. Vestibular is hearing, the equilibrium, and cochlear portion is your hearing part. So it has both hearing and equilibrium portion. Glossopharyngeal, as the name says, glosso is concerned with the tongue, and pharyngeal is the pharynx, that is the upper part of the food pipe. That is, it's going to supply the pharynx fibers, majority, and some part to the tongue, and it also has parasympathetic fibers. We'll talk about the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system in the next class. Then is the vagus. This is predominantly a parasympathetic nerve supply. It is called as vagus nerve because it has a large area. It starts from the larynx and goes till the abdomen, the lateral part of the large gut. This supplies the parasympathetic fibers. It is a parasympathetic supply because it has a large area of supply. That is, it's also called as a vagabond nerve. That is, it's supplying a big area in the thorax, in the head and neck, in the abdomen. So it is both that. Accessory nerve is a motor nerve to the neck muscles. It is supplies that, and hypoglossal is muscles of the tongue. That is intrinsic and extrinsic muscles of the tongue. They are supplied by this 12th cranial nerve or the hypoglossal nerve. Then is the spinal nerve, or you can call them the segmental. They come out through the vertebral column, through the intervertebral foramina, that is the space between the two vertebrae. Spinal nerves arise in bilateral pairs. Again, they are bilateral from the specific segment of the spinal cord. And they are 31 cord segments, and they are named according to the area from where they are arising. And you give them as capital letters: cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacral, coccygeal, etc. Okay, so spinal nerves attached to the spinal cord. You have 8 cervical, though you have 7 cervical vertebra, but the nerves are, because the area of origin is different from the one is above, and then the last one of the cervical is below the 7th cervical, so it becomes the 8th, and then you go on to the 12th thoracic, 5th lumbar, 5 sacral, and 1 coccygeal. So these are the 31 pairs of the spinal nerves, and they are named according to the area from where they are originating. Then you have the second component of the peripheral nervous system is your nerve ganglia. They are, as I told you the other day, what exactly we mean by ganglia is they are collection of your nerve cell bodies. That is what we call as nerve ganglia, with a small amount of connective tissue which is there. There are two types of ganglia which you can see. The craniosacral, if you see on the dorsal aspect of the spinal cord, where you form the spinal nerve, we'll see that is called your craniospinal, and this is sensory in function. And then you have a motor ganglia that is concerned with the autonomic ganglia. You will be having sympathetic and parasympathetic, both type of ganglia, which we'll be discussing when we talk about the autonomic nervous system. So you have nerve ganglia. So the basic components of the peripheral nervous system are the nerve fibers, the nerves. The nerves, we said there are two types, the cranial and the spinal nerves. And then you have the nerve ganglia, and the ganglia are both motor and sensory. These are having a connection with the craniosacral, the spinal, that is in relation with the sensory portion or the dorsal root of the spinal nerves, and the certain cranial nerves. And then you have the autonomic ganglia, that is your motor component. If you see this picture, this is the picture of a ganglia. Outside is the connective tissue, and there is collection of the nerve cell bodies which forms the ganglia. Then what is the structure of a spinal nerve? What exactly, how the spinal nerve is composed of? You see this picture, this is the cervical, this is a vertebra, body of a vertebra with the central white portion, which is your vertebral canal. This vertebral canal contains your spinal cord. As I told you the other day, spinal cord has a central H-shaped structure, that is its gray matter, and the outside is its white matter. This spinal cord is going to give rise to the different nerve fibers. This, as you can see, it has two branches. It has an anterior end and a posterior end, which we can also call in the medical terminology as the dorsal and the ventral root. And then you have this small swelling on the posterior aspect. Ventral side is going to be towards the broader side, which is going to be the body of the vertebra. And the posterior surface is where you have these processes, that is the dorsal surface, right? Now, in the dorsal root, you have all sorts of something which is arising from the posterior horn. You have the anterior horn of the spinal cord, that is at the anterior end, and then the posterior horn, that is from the dorsal horn. You are having myelinated fibers, unmyelinated fibers, all sorts of fibers. From the ventral horn, you are arising mostly the somatic motor fibers, because your anterior horn is said to be a motor in connection or control, and the posterior one is concerned with your sensory fibers. So all sensory fibers which are arising from different parts of the body, they ascend up and they enter into the posterior horn, and from the posterior horn they are going to ascend up to your nervous system to take the sensations up there. And then all what sensations are going to come down, they're going to come down to the interior horn of the spinal cord, and from the interior horn via the ventral root, they are going to go out and then enter into the motor fibers. They are going to enter into the spinal nerve. So ventral root is going to have all sorts of fibers, the somatic fibers, myelinated fibers, autonomic fibers, everything is there. That, as we said, it is a mixed structure. And then you have something which is there is the dilated portion near to the posterior root, that is your posterior root ganglion. Okay, so this is your craniosacral spinal ganglion, which is sensory in nature because it is concerned with the sensory root of the spinal cord. Now, how does this nerve fibers, or what is the general arrangement of the spinal nerves? When we develop, the spinal cord develops, it grows in length gradually, in length more slowly, and the spinal cord extends till the lower end of your vertebral column. But as the vertebral column grows, it grows at a rapid speed as compared to the spinal cord, which makes the lower end of the spinal cord be limited to an upper part, that is to the first lumbar vertebra. So your canal goes down at the lower level, but your spinal cord finishes at the level of the first lumbar vertebra. Okay. So in the adult, when the growth ceases, the lower end of the spinal cord only reaches till the first lumbar vertebra. To accommodate this all disproportionate level, the nerves which are coming out from various levels, they are going to be adjusted depending on, because all the nerves, they have to exit out of their respective intervertebral foramen. That is, if first cervical has to come out, it has to come out from its first cervical vertebra, or first cervical intervertebral between the two vertebrae, that for respective foramen. It's not going to go down or up. So if that level has to be achieved, if your nerve is arising at a higher level and your intervertebral foramina is at a lower level, the nerve is going to descend down till that level, and then it is going to exit out. So it's not that whatever is at the same level of the origin of the nerve is going to exit out. So that is exactly what it means. In the length of the increases, roots is going to increase because you finish your level of the spinal cord above, but the nerves are going to be higher up. The spinal cord is, and the length of the vertebral column is lower. The intervertebral foramina, they are at a lower level from the origin of the nerve. So that is exactly what it means. So in the upper cervical region, because both the intervertebral foramina and the spinal nerve origin is at the same level, so the nerves are just horizontally placed and they are small in length. Whereas the lumbar and the cervical, because we are finishing our spinal cord at the first lumbar vertebra level, but this lumbar and the sacral nerves, they are 4 to 5 in number, so they have to reach down from the level of the lumbar vertebra, first lumbar vertebra, and then exit out. So these nerves are longer, and because they have to reach their respective intervertebral lumbar and sacral intervertebral foramina, and in doing so, they all, these nerve fibers, they collect together and they form a sort of a bundle. And it is just like what it is, like a tail of the horse, because all those hair which are there, which are collectively going down. This is why this is called your chorda equina, that collection of the nerve fibers which are coming from the respective areas of the spinal cord and going down till the level of the respective intervertebral foramina. They are collective, going to form a bundle of fibers, and that is what we call as chorda equina. Chorda is the caudal end, and the equina, it resembles that of the tail of a horse. So each is, how does a nerve form? Each spinal nerve, let me see if I have a picture of the nerve. If you see this picture, the orange structure, that is your spinal cord. It is terminating at where you have that rounded green and blue structure. That is the level where L1, if you see, has been labeled as lumbar vertebra 1. But the nerves which are arising green and blue, that is your sacral and your lumbar nerves, they have to go and come out from their respective intervertebral foramina. If you see in both these pictures, so that is why these nerves, they are going to travel downwards, and reaching their respective levels, they are exiting out. If you can see in this diagram in both the sides, that is, they are forming a clump of nerve cells, nerve fibers. That clump is what we call as chorda equina. I hope now what I exactly mean is, because orange is your spinal cord that finishes at L1. At this level, the nerve fibers are still going to arise, but they have to, you can see that each nerve fiber, that is, if you see the cervical one, the top one, they are just horizontal, arising from their own levels. Thoracic range, again, arising from their own levels. Then when you reach the lumbar and the cervical, Their intervertebral foramina go at a lower level, but the spinal cord is at a higher level. So the origin of the nerves. So the nerves have to reach down at their respective intervertebral foramina. You can see that they reach the respective vertebra, and through the foramen they are going to exit out. This collection of nerve fibers is what we call as cauda equina. I hope you understand how the arrangement is there, how at what levels the nerves arise and how do they pass out. Now, how is the formation of the cervical spinal nerves? Each spinal nerve is connected to the spinal cord by two roots. What we say as the anterior root and the rootlets. Posterior root, these are further formed by the rootlets, smaller divisions. The anterior root consists of bundles of nerve fibers carrying impulses away, because we said anterior horn of the spinal cord is your motor horn. So it is going to convey or efferent fibers are going to be there, or the motor fibers. The posterior horn consists of nerve fibers that are arising from the sensory receptors. They are conveying all sorts of sensations up to the posterior horn. So that is why they are having concern with the sensory fibers. And once they reach the posterior horn, they are going to pass through a swelling on the posterior horn, which is the posterior root, what we call as the ganglion, the posterior root ganglion. At each intervertebral foramina, the anterior and the posterior roots are going to unite. They form a spinal nerve that is still inside your vertebral canal. Let me show you a picture. If you see this, these are the rootlets, the anterior and the posterior. That one is on the posterior side. The upper one is the posterior, and this way is the anterior. These are the small rootlets. These then form the anterior and the posterior root. These anterior and the posterior root form the spinal nerve still inside your vertebral canal. Then they are going to pass out from the intervertebral foramina. Each intervertebral foramina, the anterior and posterior roots, they unite to form the spinal nerve. So you can say anterior and posterior spinal rootlets. Rootlets form the roots. Anterior and posterior roots inside the vertebral canal, they are going to form the spinal nerve. Here the motor and sensory fibers mix together so that a spinal nerve is made up of mixed type of fibers. On emerging, that is coming out from the foramen, the spinal nerve divides into a large anterior ramus and a smaller posterior ramus. You see this. This is the anterior ramus, large one, and the smaller, the posterior ramus, right? This is the larger one and the smaller posterior ramus. This is outside your vertebral canal. On emerging, they are going to divide. This is a ramus. First we had the rootlets, then it is the root, then the spinal nerve, then it divides outside into anterior and posterior ramus. So what exactly is the arrangement is spinal nerve initially rise from the spinal cord as rootlets. Two rootlets converge to form two nerve roots, the anterior and the posterior. The anterior are the motor ones, posterior ones are your sensory ones. The posterior and anterior roots unite and they're just proximal to the intervertebral foramina, that is inside. And they form a mixed nerve because they're going to be communicating with both types of nerves. Immediately outside, they divide into the two rami. They are mixed again. So that is the arrangement of the formation of the nerves. Nerves supplying the muscles of the trunk for the limbs also contain about 40% sensory fibers which convey pain and proprioceptive information. So you have motor plus sensory fibers as well. Cutaneous sensory nerves contain motor fibers which serve the sweat glands and the smooth muscle of the blood vessels and the hair follicle. So that exactly is showing that the nerve is going to be both motor and having both motor and sensory fibers. See this picture? This anterior larger one is going to the skin, that is forming the dermatome, the cutaneous nerves, and then a deeper branch which is going to be the motor one which goes into the muscles, and then this posterior ramus. How is the spinal nerve then distributed? Once it is formed, ramus are formed out. What ramus supplies what area? The posterior ramus passes posteriorly down the vertebral and supplies the muscles and skin of the back because it is the dorsal ramus or the posterior ramus. The anterior ramus supplies the muscles and skin over the antrolateral, because we've said it contains both motor and sensory fiber. So that is why wherever I've written, it's both muscles and skin. Skin of the anterolateral. Back is by the dorsal ramus, anterior and the lateral portion is supplied by the muscles of the fibers from the anterior ramus, and all the muscles and skin of the limbs as well. So anterolateral portion, skin and muscles, and the muscles and skin of the limbs is by the anterior ramus. That is why nature has made it a larger ramus. It is larger in size. The posterior area of supply is just the back, so that is why it is a small ramus. In addition to the anterior and posterior rami, what other branches it's going to give? The spinal nerve is spinal nerves give a small meningeal branch that supplies the vertebra and coverings of the spine cord. Naturally, you have spinal cord being covered by the meninges, so you get a meningeal branch as well, which is going to supply to those meninges. Then you have thoracic spinal nerves have certain other branches, what they are called as the rami communicants. That is small nerves which are going to communicate with other nerves. This is basically with the communication of the spinal nerves with the autonomic nervous system, right? So those are called as the rami communicants. We'll talk about them when we talk about the autonomic nervous system. They are the gray and the white rami communicants. They are concerned, we have the sympathetic chain or the sympathetic trunk, which is a collection of the nerve fibers and the ganglia lying on either side of the vertebral column, through which your sympathetic fibers are passing. So this spinal nerve is going to be linked up with that sympathetic trunk. So those fibers which are linking up your spinal nerves with the sympathetic trunk, they are called your rami communicants. So they are communicating with the spinal nerve, and they are at the level of the thoracic, because your sympathetic nervous system is thoracolumbar outflow. That means sympathetic fibers, they are originating from the thoracic and the lumbar levels of the spinal cord. So these are the three types, or you can rather say four types, from the posterior ramus, anterior ramus, meningeal branches, and the rami communicants. These are the four distributions which come out from the spinal nerves, right? Then the posterior primary rami, they supply nerve fibers to the joints as well, muscles of the back, skin over the back. So then the interior one, they supply the interior and lateral regions and the upper and the lower limbs. So that is the main supply. Then you have functional components of the nerves, cranial and the spinal nerves, which carry certain special types of fibers. I told you visceral is being concerned with, and that was from splanchnopluric. I told you that was in relation to the viscera, that is to the organs. So visceral nervous system component is also concerned with the organs. Somatic is your body wall. I said somatopleuric mesoderm, which we developed, that is concerned with the body wall on the outside. So somatic nervous system is all the nerves which are going to go towards your periphery, towards the structures which are there on the outside of the body. And visceral nervous system is going to be concerned with the nerve supply of the viscera, that is the organs of the body. So both are going to have a sensory and a motor component. Somatic fibers, that is going towards the periphery. In this again, we divide it into a general and a special portion. I will talk about that later on. A general sensory fibers, these are somatic fibers. They transmit sensations from the body to the central nervous system, right? Sensory fibers. And somatic motor fibers, so these can be any sorts of sensations, can be exteroreceptive, proprioceptive, any type coming from different parts of the body. So one type of somatic fibers is general sensory. The other is somatic motor fibers, which transmit impulses to the skeletal muscles. These would be your fibers to going out. So bringing in sensations via the general sensory and taking out somatic motor fibers, that is taking away the orders, what to do with the muscle. Then you have visceral fibers. The visceral fibers are again sensory and motor type. The sensory fibers, they transmit pain or subconscious visceral reflex sensations. Anything which is when you feel a pain in your abdomen or in your intestines or in your stomach or in the hollow organs, as I've written, they are going to take up all these information because of the distension in those organs up to your brain, and will tell you that you are having pain or something is there. Visceral motor is, they are bringing back orders through these fibers, and they're going to transmit impulses to the smooth muscles, because you know organs have smooth muscles in their structure. That was skeletal muscle with the somatic portion, and your organs are your formation of the smooth muscles and your glands which are there. So these visceral motor, they are going to go to these two things. And these are also concerned with the uh, autonomic nervous system, right? So these are the two: visceral separate, somatic separate fibers. Then again, they are going to have general and special. General is going to be all sorts of, be pain, temperature, touch, etc. All these are general sensations. But the five sensations of your special sensations, that is vision, smell, the taste, all these, they are your special sensations. These are having special fibers, and the general sensations are being carried by general fibers, right? So when you talk about the somatic, you have a general somatic and you have a general visceral fibers. That is going to be general visceral afferent. General somatic afferent fibers which come from general cutaneous deep sensibility of the whole body, that is general sensation. Then you have general visceral fibers from the mucous membrane, viscera body, that is bringing in from the viscera. So both are bringing afferent fibers from somatic and visceral, that is all general sorts of sensations. So you have these two groups. Then you are going to have efferent. These were coming in. Then you have the afferent. These are general orders. Supply the skeletal muscles, because somatic is your body wall. Body wall is skeletal muscles. Okay. Then you have the general visceral going to the viscera. They are going to be the smooth and the cardiac muscles, because they're going to go to the organs. And we said organs are smooth muscles and the glands, right? I hope you understand. Somatic and visceral. Afferent is the sensory one coming in, efferent is going out. So what you have is, and when you say general, you mean is it is the general sensation. And when you say special, that is going to be with your taste and all that. Now, what the peripheral body wall is just going to have your general sensation, doesn't have these special sensations that we have mentioned. So these are going to be carrying these general sensations from the body wall. Then you have in the cranial nerves, you have the special sensations that is going to be carried. So that is why we have written special word with it. This is in the cranial nerve, they carry special efferent and afferent fibers. The special somatic, that is towards the periphery, they are going to be carried by the way you have the retina and the cochlea, they are carried by your special somatic, because they are nearly towards the periphery. Your ear and your eye is just, retina is near towards the periphery of the body. So that is why they are being carried by the special somatic fibers. Then you have special visceral, your, that is the taste. Let's say the taste buds is nearly like an organ. So that is why the taste sensations are being carried as afferent fibers, as it is considered as a viscera. They are going to be carried by these special fibers. And then the motor fibers, efferent, are going to go to the muscles of the special function. Again, not the general muscles. It's going to go to muscles which are performing the special functions, that is tongue and eye muscles. Right? So the special somatic are going to go there, and special visceral are going to go to the pharynx and all, where you have these special muscle contraction, that is the special organs which are there. So this is exactly what is being carried by general fibers and what is being carried by special fibers. Special fibers are going to be those which are related to your special senses, right? They're just carried by the cranial nerve. The general ones, they would be carrying all sorts of general sensations, and the orders they're going to take is all acting on the general muscles, smooth and the skeletal muscle. Okay? And efferents would be carrying the motor fibers, and afferents would be bringing in the general sensation orders. I hope now somatic, special, and general and visceral is clear. Somatic is, when we talk about, is from the body wall, that is the periphery. I told you somatopleuric, splenopleuric, if you remember. Splenopleuric is that which is concerned with your viscera of the body. So visceral is always going to be all your sensations, pain, etc. is going to come and go from the viscera of your body. You should know whether it is skeletal muscle or it is a smooth muscle. And somatic is going towards to periphery. The general would be in the spinal nerves, is going to take your general portion, and your special portion concerned with your special sensation. So these are the functional components of the cranial nerve and the spinal nerves. You get a complete question that you have to enumerate the functional components of the cranial and the spinal nerves, and then you have to briefly mention what exactly are they carrying and what exactly is the. So this should be very clear in your mind what is the functional component means. Okay? Why is it general and why is it special? I hope if you give it a reading, you will understand that. Okay? That was about the peripheral nerves, the cranial and the spinal nerves. Then these nerves form plexuses. That is, with the way we had anastomosis in the blood vessels, we have plexuses. Anastomosis was an interlinking up of the blood vessels. This is nerve doesn't have an anastomosis, but it has something what we call as plexus when one nerve gives fibers to the other nerve and they form a sort of a network. That is what we call as a plexus. So a peripheral nerve plexus, naturally your central nervous system in the brain or the spinal cord proper, you cannot form a plexus. The peripheral nerves are composed of bundles of nerve fibers. In their course, peripheral nerves sometimes divide into branches, join the neighboring peripheral nerves, and you form a nerve plexus. That is exactly a plexus. The formation of the plexus allows individual fibers to pass from one peripheral nerve to the other, and most instances, these crossing over of nerve fibers doesn't take place. Nerve plexus permits a redistribution of nerve fibers within the different peripheral nerves. So you can have a function similar coming from, if supposing it is C1 or in C3, if the C3 fibers are also contained in the nerve and C1 fibers, so whatever function C3 is doing, that is also going to be dominant in this nerve, this specific nerve where the fibers are crossing over. So you're going to have functions of both types of the fibers which are being carried by this nerve. Plexuses at the root of the limbs, the interior rami, and it plexus. Important thing is the interior rami or your ventral rami form the plexuses. The dorsal rami do not form a plexus. It is the interior rami joined to one another to form the complicated nerve plexuses. What type of plexuses we have? Cervical and brachial plexus. Cervical is at the level of your neck, that is basically at the level of where the limbs start, and brachial is where you have the upper limb starts. They form these two plexuses, and lumbar and sacral, which is at the level of your lower limb, are found at the root of the lower limb. So these are the four plexuses which are formed: cervical and brachial, lumbar and sacral. And important thing is the interior rami form or the ventral rami form the plexuses. Dorsal rami do not. So don't confuse the two. If you see this, the nerve plexus, these are intermingling. You can see different roots which are intermingling with each other. This is how the plexus is formed. So the nerve plexus is actually made up of a multitude of nerve branches, many branches. These come from spinal nerves, except for the thoracic spinal nerve all the 12, they come from the T2 does not contribute to this plexus. The remaining nerves donate their anterior rami, which branch off from the spinal nerves only to join with each other. A nerve plexus is composed of afferent and efferent fibers that arise from the merging of the anterior rami of the spinal nerves and the blood vessels. So remember anterior rami. Again, this picture also says on the nerve plexuses are only found on the ventral rami, not the dorsal. Complex network, ventral rami, most of the spinal nerves form the plexuses, not T2 to T12, formed when the ventral rami of the spinal nerves exchange fibers, right? This picture also shows you. So the features are we form entirely primary rami except T2 and T12. They form plexuses. And there where the plexuses, at what level the plexuses are formed, the spinal cord, because it has to do more function, it has to supply a more area. There you have enlargement of the spinal cord, as you can see in this picture. Those are called spinal enlargements. Because your limbs, upper and the lower limbs, they are going to function more. You form a brachial plexus and the lumbar plexus. That is why you are going to see these enlargements in the at the level of the brachial plexus and at the level of the lumbar plexus. For limbs show enlargement in the spinal cord. So that is why we had enlargements, because a plexus is formed and more function has to be performed. Nerve roots, anterior and posterior divisions. Interior is going to be supplying the flexor compartment of the body, that is the anterior and posterior is going to supply the extensor. And these have cervical, brachial, lumbar, sacral plexuses in the body. These show you all the plexuses which are there. Okay, the lumbar plexuses, sacral plexuses coming from the nerves. Then what can occur if there is damage to the nerve? When the brain or the spinal cord is damaged, injured axons do not recover. They do not regenerate. That you must remember most circumstances. The stump, because when the two nerves cut, the two ends on the two stump of the two ends, they are going to try to regenerate. But the regeneration or the connection between the two is just by these astrocytes, which are your fibrotic structures. And so the nerve is always going to be reunited by fibrotic structure. So blocked by this and the proliferation at the injury site, and the axonal sprouts are soon retracted, right? Growth starts, but in between your astrocytes, which are the connective tissue element of your nervous tissue, they are going to just form fibrous tissue. So normal structure is never going to regenerate. So as a result, permanent disability follows destruction of a tract in the central nervous system. Dermatomes. These dermatomes are unilateral area of the skin innervated by the sensory fibers of a spinal nerve, which is called a dermatome. So a area of the skin which is supplied by a single segment of spinal nerve is called a dermatome. The dorsal root of the spinal is distributed to a particular segment. So they are each spinal nerve except C1 sensory supplied to a specific area. Area of the skin which is supplied by the single spinal nerve is what we call as dermatome. These segments do not extend onto the face because the same face is supplied by a fifth cranial nerve. You see this? These are the dermatomes. These are lines horizontal supplied by a small single spinal nerve, provide sensory input, and they are now the important thing is that these dermatomes, if one is damaged nerve, it is not going to die out the dermatome of that area, because these nerves, they are overlapping each other. The area of supply of these dermatomes is overlapping. So if one nerve is damaged, the other fibers, they take over and they provide that functioning. So the sensations would not be, or the motor function would not be completely lost, because there is an overlap of the dermatome, right? From clinical studies, we have mapped out different patterns of these lesions. If you see this, these are the dermatomes on the white and black, these on the front and the back, and you can see it is not extending onto the face. Now it is said that these dermatomes, they result in, or a single posterior root are really result of numbness over the area demarcated for that area, because they overlap. There is providing a type of double coverage. So two dermatomes, they overlap each other. So if one is damaged, the other is going to take over the area of supply. So spinal nerves must be interrupted. So both the nerves to produce a appreciable area of numbness. So it's not purely a hard and fast demarcation. It is an overlap. So one damaged, the other takes over. If both of them are damaged, then that area would be dead as compared with the sensations which are there. Right? These are the dermatomes. I think we talk about these few things with the next chapter when we talk about the autonomic nervous system, and that would be the last portion of your nervous tissue, the segmental innervation or your myotomes. Okay, that is the dermatome. So quickly, because dermatomes are very important, to quite a question. What exactly is it? What is its clinical importance? Okay, thank you very much.